I'm Sharon Squassoni, and I direct the Proliferation Prevention Program here at CSIS. And I'm talking today with Tom Countryman, who's the former Acting Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security at the State Department. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Sharon. Honored to be here.
You have a long career and experience at the State Department dealing with non-proliferation and international security issues. We're here today to talk about Japan, its nuclear energy program, and the surplus of plutonium that it has, both at home and also abroad. For our watchers who may not know about the ins and outs of nuclear nonproliferation, plutonium can be used either for fuel for nuclear power reactors or in bombs. And so this surplus of plutonium that Japan has had for a long time is a cause for concern for some folks. In your career at the State Department, you handled all of our peaceful nuclear cooperation agreements with other countries. And there are certain guidelines and restrictions in those agreements that help keep material safe and secure and make sure it's not used for military purposes. What was your experience with Japan in this regard?
First point I'd like to make is that the history of cooperation between Japan and the United States in the nuclear field is second to none. We have been the closest of partners, not just in economic and technological development of electricity generating nuclear reactors, but also in dealing together with the related issues: safety of nuclear plants, security of the material, and non-proliferation. That is, helping to ensure that other countries do not seek to acquire the technology to make nuclear weapons. No better partner than Japan for the United States. Today, after the Fukushima disaster of 2011, there is a very active public debate in Japan about how much of their energy future will be dependent upon nuclear power plants. That's a debate that is up to the Japanese people and officials to resolve. Japan made a decision 40 years ago that instead of disposing of spent fuel after it has gone through a reactor once and storing that securely, they would pursue a path of what we call a closed fuel cycle. That is, reprocessing the spent fuel to produce plutonium, which could be burned in another type of reactor. That is, again, a decision for the Japanese government and people to make. But it has implications for the U.S. and the rest of the world. As you note, there are real security and non-proliferation concerns associated when anyone, Japan or any other country, starts making large quantities of plutonium.
So are we worried or concerned that Japan is going to use this plutonium in nuclear weapons?
I have no such concern. I don't know anybody in the U.S. government who believes that Japan would do that.
So when you talk about regional considerations, what comes to mind for me is China is a nuclear weapons state, but it is also considering going into commercial reprocessing of spent fuel, which would increase the plutonium in East Asia. South Korea, we had, and you were actually a part of those negotiations with the South Koreans. They would love to reprocess and have come up with an alternative technology that they say is more proliferation resistant because it doesn't fully separate the plutonium. How, especially in the context of North Korean nuclear tests and missile tests, tensions have increased in East Asia. How is all this playing? Does any of this have an impact on how we view Japanese policies right now on plutonium?
It doesn't change my point of view, and I believe the U.S. government's point of view, about Japan's commitment never to produce nuclear weapons. But you're correct that the regional tension today, the fact that North Korea is constantly provoking, constantly developing nuclear weapons adds on to a long existing layer of distrust among the major powers of East Asia, Japan, Republic of Korea, and China. And even though Japan and South Korea are allies in facing the security challenge of North Korea, there's still a level of distrust between them for historical reasons. What concerns us is that miscalculation by any of these states, suspicion about the concerns of others, could lead first to a race in reprocessing, that is, a race in production of plutonium, and then in a future could lead to a nuclear arms race in the region as well. And that's something, obviously, that would be destructive to the security of East Asia and of the world.
And the timing right now, you know, South Korea just elected Moon Jae-in, who has come in and is not a big fan of nuclear power, right? He's actually stopped construction and has made statements saying that he'd like South Korea to reduce its reliance on nuclear power. Japan, 6 years after Fukushima, really has not restarted its nuclear energy program in earnest. So it had 54 reactors. I think only 4 or 5 are operating now. Is China aside, but is there a moment now, is there an opportunity to tackle these issues in a productive way to reduce some of the mistrust and maybe foster a little more collaboration?
Well, let me give you both a political and an economic answer. Before I was a diplomat, I pretended to be an economist, and I look at the world in economic terms frequently. In economic terms, this is precisely the moment to do what President Moon is doing in South Korea, which is to reassess the economic implications of choices in nuclear policy. At the top level, that means, do we wish to build more reactors? Do we wish to expand our reliance on nuclear fission as an electricity source, or do we want to reduce it? And the same debate is happening in Japan, of course. But as I said before, the secondary question is also urgent, which is to reassess the economics of reprocessing. Do you need to invest in a more advanced generation of reactors that can consume plutonium as a fuel, with all of the incredible expense that that entails? Keep in mind that the United States and Britain have essentially given up on reprocessing due to the outrageous economic cost. France and Russia continue to pursue this as a policy, but, but economically, it's hard to make an argument that it is the best policy for Japan and South Korea, particularly when you put against it the high political costs of producing so much plutonium.
Right, and Japan is the only non-nuclear weapon state that engages in both enrichment, uranium enrichment, and spent fuel reprocessing, so making it an outlier for all sorts of reasons. However, you know, balanced, more than balanced, one could say, by its incredibly strong non-proliferation policies. Tom, thanks so much. It's been great to talk to you.